top countries to suffer from inflation. Over the last century, the world's nations have experimented with fiat currencies backed by the full faith and credit of the governments that issued them, resulting in 55 hyperinflationary episodes. Number 10. Hungary, August 1945 to July 1946. World War II wreaked havoc on Hungary's economy. According to estimates, 40% of Hungary's capital assets was destroyed in the battle due to its unfortunate situation as a war zone. It had previously engaged in a reckless, debt-fueled production ramp up to support the German war effort, but Germany had never paid for the supplies. Hungary was compelled to pay large reparations to the Soviets when it signed a peace deal with the Allies in 1945, which amounted for 25 to 50% of Hungary's budget during its hyperinflationary era. Meanwhile, the Allied Control Commission effectively took over the country's monetary policy. The Soviets who dominated the commission turned a deaf ear to these warnings, leading some to assume that the hyperinflation was engineered to achieve a political objective: the annihilation of the middle class, according to Hungarian central bankers Bomberger and Makin in 1983. Number 9. Zimbabwe, March 2007 to November 2008. Following Robert Mugabe's land reforms in 2000 to 2001, land was expropriated mostly from white farmers and transferred to the majority black population. Zimbabwe's hyperinflation was preceded by a long, grinding decrease in economic output. This resulted in a 50% drop in productivity over the next 9 years. Outsized government budget deficits resulted from socialist reforms and a costly role in Congo's civil war. Simultaneously, the population of Zimbabwe was falling as people fled the country. The government had to monetize its budget deficit because to the two opposed causes of rising government spending and a shrinking revenue base. Number 8. Yugoslavia, Republic Srpska, April 1992 to January 1994. With the demise of the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, formerly a crucial geopolitical player connecting East and West, saw its international position diminish, and its ruling Communist Party finally fell under the same strain as the Soviets. As the newly constituted political entities sorted out their independence, Yugoslavia was divided into various countries along ethnic lines, resulting in wars in the years following. As a result, trade between regions of the former Yugoslavia decreased, as did industrial output. At the same time, an international embargo on Yugoslav exports was imposed, significantly stifling output. In contrast to other nations that broke away, such as Serbia and Croatia, the newly established Federal Republic of Yugoslavia kept much of the bloated bureaucracy that existed before the break, contributing to the federal deficit, according to Petrovic, Budjetic, and Vujosevic. 1998. Number 7. Weimar Germany, August 1922 to December 1923. Following its defeat in World War I a few years prior, Weimar Germany witnessed hyperinflation in the early 1920s. Germany was forced to pay enormous reparations to the victorious side as a result of the war to compensate for the costs incurred by the victorious side. However, Germany was not authorized to pay the reparations with its current currency, the paper mark, which had already depreciated severely during the war due to Germany's reliance on borrowed monies to fuel its war effort. Weimar Germany was forced to sell substantial amounts of the mark in exchange for foreign currencies that were eligible as payments in order to pay the reparations in a currency other than the paper mark. When the payments were due in the summer of 1921, a policy of selling the mark to buy foreign currencies at any price resulted in runaway hyperinflation due to the mark's extreme depreciation. Number 6. Greece, May 1941 to December 1945. Due to the outbreak of World War II, Greece's fiscal budget balance shifted from a 271 million drachma surplus in 1939 to a 790 million drachma deficit in 1940. Foreign trade fell dramatically. By the time Greece was invaded by the Axis powers at the end of 1940, the fiscal situation had already deteriorated. Supporting 400,000 Axis soldiers stationed there and a large indemnity payable to the occupiers were among the additional costs imposed on Greece by the puppet government of Axis powers that governed the country during its occupation. In addition, Greece's national income was reduced from 67.4 billion drachmas in 1938 to 20 billion drachmas in 1942. Greece resorted to monetization at the central bank to pay the aforementioned expenses and finance the rest of the deficit as tax receipts dropped. Number 5. China, October 1947 to May 1949. After World War II, China was torn apart by civil conflict. In 1948, China's monetary system was split among 10 primary mediums of exchange as nationalists and communists fought for control over the country and established competing currencies in the process. The three governments, including the Japanese invaders, engaged in monetary warfare by attempting to destroy competing currencies in various ways, according to Campbell and Tulloch 1954. To support the fight, the nationalists ran large budget deficits, which they eventually tried to pay by printing money, causing hyperinflation to spiral out of control. This was preceded by China's rejection of the gold standard in 1935. They even enlisted the help of the Taiwanese central bank to carry out the monetization program, which resulted in hyperinflation in Taiwan. Number 4. Peru, July 1990 to August 1990. Inflation was a major issue for Peru in the later half of the 20th century. Fernando Belaúnde Terry was president throughout the first part of the 1980s, and Peru was subjected to IMF-imposed austerity measures in the aftermath of the Latin America financial crisis that began early in that decade. According to economist Thayer Watkins, the Belaúnde Terry administration presented the impression that it was following the IMF's reform recommendations, while in fact it was not. The economy was experiencing stagflation at the time, and the electorate blamed it on IMF austerity programs, even though those policies were not being implemented. As a result, Alan Garcia was elected president in 1985. Garcia implemented populist economic measures that weakened Peru's economy and cut it off from foreign credit markets. In Peru, rising inflation became hyperinflation as a result of a lack of credit and deteriorating economic conditions. Number 3. France, May 1795 to November 1796. The French Revolution in 1789 to 1799 occurred after France had incurred significant debts as a result of fighting wars, especially the battle for American independence from Great Britain. The nationalization of land previously owned by the Catholic Church was one of the French Revolution's primary economic policies. Because they held so much land but had so little political clout in the new state, the church was considered as an easy target for asset expropriation. The government subsequently issued assignats to the general public, which were effectively land-backed currency that note holders were meant to be able to redeem for land at a later date. However, in an attempt to balance the deficit, the government issued far too many notes, depreciating the assignats and resulting in hyperinflation. Number 2. Nicaragua, June 1986 to March 1991. Nicaraguans elected the Communist Sandinistas to power in 1979. This occurred against the backdrop of a worldwide recession and financial crisis affecting most of Latin America, which was precipitated by record-high debt levels and states' inability to fulfill those debts. The revolution wreaked havoc on Nicaragua's economy, with GDP dropping by 34% from 1978 to 1979. When the Sandinistas came to power, they nationalized vast swaths of the economy, adding to the economic upheaval and impeding a strong recovery. In response, Nicaragua's government implemented an expansionary fiscal policy and borrowed money from abroad to boost domestic demand. In the second half of the decade, funding increased to fund a battle against the Contras. While capital controls and a fixed currency rate originally kept inflation at bay, economic reforms in 1985 that moved away from these policies liberated the Nicaraguan economy's previously repressed inflation. Number 1. United States of America, 1965 to 1982. Americans who have just gone to the grocery store or began their holiday shopping may have noticed a rise in consumer costs. According to the Consumer Price Index, the annual rate of inflation in the United States reached 6.2% in October 2021, the highest in more than 3 decades, CPI. Other inflation indicators have also increased significantly in recent months, though not to the same amount as the CPI. Understanding why inflation has risen so swiftly should help policymakers figure out how long the spike will stay and what, if anything, they should do about it. The recent increase in inflation looks to be fundamentally different from previous bouts of inflation that were more directly linked to the regular business cycle,